thank you, everyone, for coming here and celebrating the life of my grandmother. 10 years ago, I stood before many of you at my grandfather's funeral, and I shared a story of what it was like coming home from college, every couple of months. And, just like Grandpa, if a story is worth telling one time, it's worth telling 1,000 times. So here it goes. I would pull into the driveway after a 10-hour drive, completely exhausted. I would plop on the couch. Grandpa would usually be sitting in his favorite chair, working on a guitar or a mandolin. And then the conversation would start. I'd say, "Peter, just went to the market. Would you like some cantaloupe?" "No, sir, I'm okay." "Peter, I got some watermelon in there. You want some watermelon?" "No, I'm okay, Grandpa." "You want some pop?" "No, I'm good." "How about a sandwich?" Then I was like, Grandpa, sandwich sounds good. All right. "Hey, Virgie, Peter believes he'd like a sandwich." And miraculously, a sandwich would appear within minutes. In a nutshell, that was Grandma. She's the quintessential picture of the wife of noble character as seen in Proverbs 31. I'm going to read just a few verses of that. "A wife of noble character, who can find? She's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She gets up while it is still dark. She provides food for her family. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks." And I don't know how many of you ever got to Grandma's house and you realized that she had just moved a piece of furniture that she had no business moving. She makes coverings for her bed. I read that and I thought, besides Aunt Charlene, I've probably spent more nights in that house than anybody else in this room, and every single night when I went to bed, she would have turned down the sheets. Greta has not done that for me. She's clothed with strength and dignity. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. Her children arise and call her blessed. Grandma had 18 great-grandchildren. And if you could, they're kind of spread throughout the room, but if for just a second, could all of the great-grandkids stand up for just 1 second? The older people in the back are not the great-grandkids. 18, almost all of them are here. "Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." I'm here to praise the life of Virginia Smith. And it's one of the greatest honors of my life to stand before you and talk about my grandma. 10 years ago, this was actually kind of easy because I had thought about that speech many years before Grandpa ever passed away. I knew it had to be 3 points in a poem. It had to be theologically correct. And I knew at some point I had to settle once and for all about the sea of forgetfulness. I hope Pastor Smith has never preached about the sea of forgetfulness. If he has,
see me after.
See Norm afterwards. But while I knew this day would come, I never really allowed myself to think about what I would say at Grandma's funeral. Because while Grandpa always remained Grandpa, and he was a wonderful grandfather, his influence in my life makes my life exponentially better. But while he was always Grandpa, there was a time in my life, there was a point in my life where Grandma became Mom, where she became Mother. And like every good son, I would call Mom as often as possible. And for 25 plus years, we had a almost nearly identical telephone conversation. If you know this, Grandma did not like talking on the phone. If you ever got a voicemail from Grandma, it was usually, "Hi, honey, it's Grandma."
Yeah.
Click. That's it. That's all you would get. But her conversation would go like this. "Hey, Grandma. Peter? Oh, hi, honey. I was just thinking about you." Every single time, she was just thinking about you. "Oh, yeah? Well, how are you today?" "Feeling fine. Boy, is it cold up here. How's the weather down there?" "That's great, Grandma. You should take that vacation you always talked about." It's like, "Oh, one of these days, honey." Everything was one of these days, right? "I'm just going to go to the beach. I'm not going to tell anyone I'm there." Well, and she'd always end with this. "Well, tell the kids I love them. Give them a big kiss for me. And I sure do love you." I know when I talked to Cindy on the phone, she ends every conversation that same way. It just clicked with me recently, when I talked to her. It's that "I sure do love you" every single time you got off the phone with her. And while the conversations may not have always been deep, there was a familiarity with them that always felt safe and loving. And that was the beauty of Grandma. There was never any judgment. I knew that I could tell her anything and she would respond with love, warmth, wisdom. And in fact, I think the only time I ever really got in trouble with her was when I was a 20-year-old college student. I would make the 10-hour drive from Tennessee home about once a month for two fairly selfish reasons. One, there was a girl. The other is I needed my clothes washed. And I'd bring this big old bag of dirty clothes, and I'm like, "No, Grandma, I got it," kind of knowing she was going to wash all my clothes. And I finally had worn out my welcome with the Grandma laundromat. I think Aunt Charlene was a part of that last one. And she very kindly said, "Peter, please don't ever do that again." "Yes, ma'am." 12985 Huffman Road. It's as close to a childhood home as I have. Some of my earliest memories are in that house. The carpet in the den turning your socks pink. Sleeping in the back room, wondering why, and some of the cousins will know this, wondering why that one picture had the eyes that kind of followed you wherever you went, so they'd always set it down. Last night I watched Ireland, Patrick, and Sophia building forts, not very different from Norm, Jenny, and me building them 40 years ago.
Hey, quiet about that.
We're really that old, guys.
We still do sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. So what do you do when you come home and Mom isn't there? Well, you snoop around. But not just for anything. That'd be weird. So I snooped around last night for something very specific because I was almost certain Grandma would have kept this. See, my son Micah, he took a pottery class this last year in high school, and our house is now adorned with these really beautiful pieces, lanterns and this cookie jar, and there's a bowl. Like, these are really nice pieces that you want to display. And while Micah was in his class, I was like, I took a pottery class once. And I don't remember all of the pieces that I made during that class, but I did remember one, and it was my favorite, and I remember giving it to Grandma, and I'm like, surely Grandma would keep this piece of pottery. You know what? Found it. It was right where I expected it to be. It was in the buffet in the living room, or in the dining room. It was this donut. This is terrible. I showed this to Micah yesterday, and he said it's not even round, which is the essence of the donut, the fact that it's actually round. But I remember giving this to Grandma and her being so proud, or at least pretending to be so proud. And I was not a little kid when I made this. I was 13. Should have been much better than this donut, but that was Grandma. She loved it, or at least she pretended to. She made a 13-year-old kid proud, and a 45-year-old man happy that Mama kept his schoolwork. Now, while Grandma's love for each of her grandchildren was never in question, that love paled in comparison to her love for Grandma. It was hard sometimes to watch her over the past decade since he's been gone. She'd often wonder why the Lord didn't take her too when Grandpa passed away. And I would just respond, I'd say, well, Grandma, I guess he just knew that we needed you a little bit longer. British poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sonnet 43 begins with the famous line that probably everyone in this room could quote. It's, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. And that's all we can quote, because then we go on to butcher it with really lame and trite stuff. But it's the rest of that poem that describes how deeply Virginia loved Charles Smith. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. When feeling out of sight for the ends of being an ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day is most quiet need. By sun and candlelight, I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. Last week, Grandma was reunited with Grandpa. And if I could have just one more phone call with her, I'd say, hey, Grandma, I sure was thinking about you. Give Charles and Nancy a big hug and a kiss for all of us. We sure do love you.